Welcome to the Healing Place podcast, a space filled with inspirational stories of hope, along with practical advice for your healing journey. Your host is Teri Wellbrock, trauma warrior, writer, speaker, blogger, therapy dog handler, and founder of the Sammy's Bundles of Hope project. As a survivor and a thriver, Teri's mission is to shine the light of hope into the world by interviewing insightful guests from across the globe. Please stay tuned at the end of today's interview as we honor our sponsors. The Healing Place podcast is a fiscally sponsored project of Fractured Atlas. Now, here's your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and very excited to have with me today Fritzi Horstman, who is and I just said it, and then I have to look again, founder and executive director of Compassion Prison Project. So welcome, Fritzi.
Thank you so much, Teri. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and we talked for just a second before I hit record about the impact of a video on your website. It's truly on my soul. I mean, my heart and my soul. So explain to listeners what it is you do.
Our mission is to transform prisons and communities with compassionate action. Our focus is on childhood trauma and what the impacts of trauma are on the brain, body, and spirit. And when I say prisons, I mean the incarcerated, but also the correctional officers, because I believe prisons are like a trigger center where everybody in there is traumatized, and one person triggers one and then they react, and it's a cycle. And like all violent cycles, we need to interrupt this. The prison to the school to prison pipeline, that's a violent cycle. And the trigger cycle in the prisons is something that's my mission, which is to transform prisons in 3 years to be all trauma informed. I want all prisons to be trauma informed. That's the vision.
Yeah, I have this vision of like the whole world being a trauma informed community, from small communities such as prisons. I think the video was at like Prison Yard. I had gone to the YouTube channel and watched it. Yes, and so from the small communities to the larger communities. I think as we start to understand more the impact of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, on our lives, we can start to take a step back and ask that question, like you just said before we hit record, instead of what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Exactly.
And with ACEs, just so you know, I've been doing some research about the incarcerated population and their adverse childhood experiences. And what I found out is that in America, 60% have one or more ACE. In prisons, it's 98% in the surveys I've done. Yeah. In America, 12.5 have 4 or more ACEs. In prisons, right now, my surveys are showing 75% have 4 or more ACEs. And when you get to that level of adverse childhood experiences, your life basically is unmanageable. You're living in fight or flight, basically. Yeah. So what does that do? You know, your immune system is shot, and you're trying to figure out a way just to calm yourself, and it doesn't happen. I have 7 ACEs.
Yeah.
So I've lived with anxiety all my life, and you know, my sister also, we're all both trying to find ways to heal and to survive. And that this is not just, you know, this is not a white person's problem. This isn't a black person's problem. This is a universal problem, as you know. And one of the things we're doing right now, we're doing trauma circles on Zoom now. And instead of stepping inside the circle, we raise our hand to show how many ACEs we've had. And we're doing a pilot to a community in Canada. And I'm really excited to see how it transforms. This community has had suicides almost every day now. Oh. And one of our employees is, she's like, we got to help this community. So we're doing we're doing trauma awareness in this small town. And that's the vision. While we're in COVID, we can bring awareness to every town in the United States. And so for your listeners, if you have a community that needs some ACE awareness, we're happy to bring the circles to your community. So that's one of the things we're making available to everybody. It's so exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And I love that idea. I think there are some blessings to be found in COVID. Yes, the isolation is horrific, and there's so much being triggered by it. Yes. With people who didn't even realize they had adverse childhood experiences. But there's also blessings to be found in the work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Yes. And one of the things that COVID kind of brought a light to was dying alone. A lot of people are in hospitals dying alone. And if you look at the prison population, they're separated from their families. They are not able to be with their loved ones when they die. And when they're in prison, they're also dying alone. So the deep sadness that families are starting to feel in our society, in the non-prison society, this is some of the deep sadness that I want to bring the awareness about the people who live in prison. It's a deep sadness, and that's where the humanity starts to emerge. Is right. These are humans in there, and they made a really horrific mistake for the most part, and yet they're humans, and that's what I want to shine a light on. Also, is the correctional officers. They're also humans. They're not machines. They're not, they're trained to be, vigilant, and it's destroying them. PTSD, trauma, and stress on that job is just, off the charts. So the Compassion Prison Project wants to bring compassion to both sides of the bars is really, and trauma-informed prisons. Imagine that, when instead of saying, like we said, what's wrong with you? What happened to you? And realizing that when you're getting feces thrown on you, this is not an act of defiance. This is an act of help. This is a call for help. And as we bring the stress level down, these incidences are going to come down. And that's my vision, so that the men and women who work there can come home healthy and have meaningful lives. The life expectancy of a correctional officer is 59 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So, and that kind of equals the, in ACEs, you have 6 or more ACEs, your life expectancy drops by 20 years. Both my parents died. My mother died at 69. My father died at 61. And so both of them high ACEs, and that's untreated ACEs. It's this is a warning for your listeners, is if we don't treat the ACEs, if we stay in this state of perpetual anxiety and stress and depression,
yes,
our life expectancy goes down, and we won't go to our daughter's wedding. We won't see our grandchildren. And this kind of awareness is really urgent. The comorbidity, you want to talk about the comorbidity of COVID? I'm just going to call it and say it's trauma. Yep, that's trauma, because when you have that much toxic stress in your body, all those chemicals, the adrenaline and the cortisol, your immune system just is shot. So you add a virus that nobody knows about, that the body hasn't ever seen.
Right.
There's no chance. There's no chance. You can't fight it off. You have to have a vibrant immune system. And that's why we got to bring it all down, bring the stress level down.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a workaholic, and that's so I don't have to feel. Yes, right. But those are, us trauma people, we live in our heads. And, just this thought of just bringing it down to like a different level, like a calm level. One of my next interviews, I'm doing a podcast too, and one of my interviews is with a woman named Betsy Politan, and she's going to teach the incarcerated men and women how to just move, feel your hands as you move, just do some simple somatic exercises, which I didn't even know about somatics until I walked into prison. I didn't know. I'm on the journey to heal myself. I think we all are. I think that's what you're doing as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so that's what was one of the things I was going to bring up. Like tapping is one of the things I've utilized. I have this huge toolbox that I have filled now with Ho'oponopono Hawaiian healing and tapping and mindfulness and just this huge, wonderful collection. I did EMDR therapy for 4 years. But yeah, so tapping are those things, so you try to bring things in as healing resources then?
Exactly. And we're developing a whole video series called The Healing Path. We were calling it the toolbox. But it's interesting you said Ho'oponopono, because that is one of the things we did that day when we filmed The Circle. We did three different exercises. One was the compassion trauma circle, which is the ACE circle. The next was reading out the symptoms of trauma and going around the circle so people could tell everyone what symptom of trauma really affected them, like hypervigilance or inability to love.
Yeah, I saw that in that video, which again, just such a powerful video. If everybody gets a chance to go check that out, please do. But when they were passing the microphone and talking about.
That was in Honor Yard. So there's two videos. There's Step Inside the Circle, which is the compassion trauma circle. And the next video is Honor Yard. And the third one, when we get to it, is called Forgiveness, where they go around and they forgive themselves. They forgive their parents or their caregivers who traumatized them, and they ask for forgiveness for the wrongs that they've committed, which, being a human, I think we all are guilty of some wrongs. And it's in that realization that no one's perfect, and to expect, these men and women who are so traumatized to have been perfect and then to have committed a crime. And this is the piece that I really want people to understand. When the prefrontal cortex goes offline, which is what happens when you're in a stressful situation, I'm sure your audience knows, but there is no morality. People say these people made a choice. They have to pay for their crime. But when your prefrontal cortex goes offline, there is not an executive function happening. And, liken it to road rage. If you've ever had that moment when you just want to kill the person who's in front of you, who just cut you off. I mean, I don't even know who I am in that moment. I couldn't say that I'm Fritzi Horstman in that moment. All I can know is that person is threatening my life, and my amygdala is on fire, and cortisol and adrenaline are running through my veins, and there is no thinking going on. That is not a necessary function. The hippocampus shuts it down, like your digestive. Those functions stop running when you're traumatized, when you're triggered. So this is science, and needs to be like a known fact. Everybody knows fight, flight, or freeze, but nobody knows prefrontal cortex and amygdala. And what happens there. And that's the piece that we really, I'm just going to talk about it until everybody understands it. That's it. It's very, very simple. And so we look at these men and women who commit horrendous crimes, that they annihilate and they traumatize the victims, the families, or the people that survive. And we want justice, and I agree. And yet, justice is in seeing the whole picture, that these people that committed these crimes were victims too. And when you're a victim, and ask these poor people that have experienced a crime, are victims, what happens to your body? What happens to your responses in the world? You're a whole nother person suddenly. You're not that little innocent person that thinks the world is magical. The magic has been blocked off because now you're afraid for your life at all instances, right? Yeah. You told me your story, and I feel so much for you. And we narrow our vision about crimes that are committed, and instead of putting in the bigger picture, like if you had a chance to meet the person who committed the crime and you heard his sadness,
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want him to be rehabilitated? Wouldn't you want him to be treated with kindness so he can heal?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I think that's what happened in that moment when the prison called me and told me that he had died in prison. And again, I fell to my knees, I sobbed, I cried, I wrote about it on Facebook, and I just had this weight lift from me. But it was, yes, it was a relief for me, but it was just an overwhelming sadness for him, and a connection with him that really happened in that moment, because I thought, and I told you again before I hit record, I thought to myself, what did he go through? What was his trauma in his life? I was just early on in my trauma recovery. So I was still a mess, having panic attacks and trying to figure out how to get through this. And yeah, I think we almost had a bonding moment in his death, and realizing that he had been through, I'm sure, horrific childhood.
Horrific. I can guarantee you, because
Yeah.
anyone who commits a crime, they're traumatized. I mean, I would say 98% are traumatized.
Right.
But I would also say that they don't have hope. And to get to a place of criminality, you have all your options have been shut down. There are no more options, or there are options, but you can't see them. And so it's really, and remember that resilience, the key factor to resilience is that one person who can see you, who can say, hey, look at you, you're something else. And, when I walked into prison, that's what I said to them. I said, hey, you're something else. Now show me what you got. And that's what they wanted to do. And we just wrote, we're still working on this book called Invincible Minds. And they're writing about their trauma, and they're writing about the stories of their childhood. One man said, I thought violence was normal. I thought that what you did was you would beat up your mother. I thought that's what you're supposed to do. So, it's a different kind of indoctrination. But when you resort to violence, when violence is your only option, you can't really blame crime as being the thing that they do. I mean,
Right.
Just on an intellectual level anyway. It's just that we need, my vision is to let all communities know what trauma is doing. And one of the sayings I have is, it stops with me. I have a 14-year-old. He was in my body when I was, filled with anxiety. I've been doing some healing modalities, and it's coming down, including reading this book called The Presence Process. I don't know if you've read this.
I haven't.
Oh my gosh, by Michael Brown. Gabor Mate recommended it, and I'm in my 7th week, but I'm actually starting to feel again. And living in the society that's completely numb, I mean, it's kind of an anomaly to be feeling what I'm feeling. So I highly recommend that on your healing journey. All you have to do is breathe in the morning and breathe at night, 15 minutes each time. But you have to read the whole book. You can't just skip.
Yes, I will. I will for sure.
Don't skip to the
Okay.
breathing. You got to. He's really adamant about that, and I agree with him. It's a process. We got it. Trauma was a process that came on. So we got to. It's like we got to undo the process of trauma. So highly recommend that. But my child, he's 14 years old, and I've seen what my trauma did to him, and I found it out. I was in the kitchen, and that was a place where I would really be really agitated. And I'm like, why, when we're cooking together, am I just a freakazoid? And through this book, I realized it was my mother. It was like my mother in the kitchen was a traumatic place for me to be. Like I couldn't chop the parsley fine enough. I couldn't, everything I did was wrong. And so I was transferring all of that. I was reenacting the trauma in the kitchen with my son. And the level of an epiphany that was for me, to be able to just see it and then like start calming down. And, we're gradually working our way. Like we made ice cream. We made mint ice cream the other day, and it was perfect. It was, for me, it was a trauma-free
Right.
cooking.
That's beautiful. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I so understand. And my older kids, I have a 26-year-old will be 27 in a few days, and a 24-year-old. And so I just remember thinking, I will never let happen to my children what I went through. They will never go through what I went through. They'll never go through. And yet, along the line, because I was just a mess, truly, and lost in my own chaos as I've since, now that I can talk to them as adult men, and they completely understand. But I was so lost in my chaos that there was chaos created for them that I didn't know I was creating until I got to this healing point. And then I was like, oh, now I see what I was doing. Yeah.
Right. And like, it stops with me though. I mean,
Yes.
and I know you didn't want to do it, but this is subversive stuff in our bodies. We don't really know what we're doing. But awareness is the first and most important part of what we can do.
Right.
Is let people know they're traumatized. Just let them know what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, and how it presents in our society.
And that there's hope. I mean,
exactly.
That was our word that we talked about. Hope is it's critical.
Absolutely. There's hope and there's healing. And let's start now. Let's not postpone it. And, meditation, it used to be like this woo-woo thing, but now, guess what?
Right.
It rewires your brain. Check it out. Like, if the science says it's okay, let's go with what the science says. They say mindfulness, meditation, tapping, anything, like all those modalities. And, we're on the front lines, Teri,
Right.
of changing this planet. Literally, we're changing the planet.
I'm excited about it. I just think there's so much hope to be had in that. I always thought if you went through trauma, you were quote unquote broken forever. Right. And now to know that, yes, brain plasticity, and we can rewire the brain and those neuron pathways, and we can change habitual patterns, and we can do. So I want to come back to Ho'oponopono, and how did it work how did they relate to that when you were doing it?
And it's interesting because we've removed it from our trauma circle because there are people who are really triggered by their victims, and they don't want to forgive their victims. So to present it too much, so it's more we focus on the circle with just forgiving yourself, and really bringing it into your own awareness. But in that yard, see, I think that the power of the circle cannot be underestimated, and I think that's what community is. And we created a community that day. That is a community. It's an incredible that honor yard where these men really vow to better themselves. That's what they're doing there. But we create community and we heal together, because healing does not happen in a vacuum. Healing, and when you see that was the power of that circle that day. They saw that all these other men had endured the same abuse and same horrors that they had. And we're, like I said, more than 4 aces, one ace, just watching your parents want to get divorced. The tension and the adversity in the household is really damaging to a little spirit. And the thing is that the little child can't tell the difference between himself and the parents, or he kind of absorbs the stress and the violence in his own body. And then, of course, the brain doesn't develop. The brain actually develops like incorrectly. There's less gray matter. There's the amygdala, not the amygdala, the microglia. There's a whole thing about the microglia. We're literally with half a brain. We have less neurons, less synapses. It's just not working. It's like a fog. And the fog is lifting right now.
Yeah. Well,
but
living I know, like dissociation and not even being a part of that was my MO. I was seeing things from outside my body. This particularly in the trauma, and going back to that. So yes, I can only imagine what prisoners in living horrific everyday circumstances in horrible childhoods, and the trauma that they are going through and the impact that it has on their brain.
Yeah, and the mental illness. And the only way you can heal is if you feel safe.
Yeah.
And so we're talking, and I'm back to the correctional officers and the men and women in prison. Nobody feels safe in that institution. And guess what? When men and women go home to their families, they're bringing it all home with them. They're not going to feel safe at home either. And that's where there's a lot of domestic violence, a lot of addictions, and suicide. So this is a real, and the other part about it is correctional officers are the most demeaned and maligned occupation you can have, pretty much. So this has got to be fixed. I mean, from my perspective. And for the prisoners, I mean, this is our mental health institutions. So we're also subjecting officers that don't have the tools for these people who are extremely traumatized. 8, 9, 10. I had 3 men who had 10 ACEs in my class, and no, 4, because there was a new one who came in. I mean, so to have 10 ACEs, you have everything. Basically, the book is thrown at you. The ACE book has been thrown at you, and there's no escaping. There's no escaping. You're in a constant state of toxic stress. So but my compassion is for everyone. My compassion is for the policemen and the first responders, the correctional officers, for the men and women in prison, for the poor children and adults who lived in those households of annihilation. We've been annihilated.
Well, and you had also brought up the victims and the impact on them as well. And, like me sitting here, the victim of horrible crimes.
Yes. And yes, the poor victims of horrible crimes. Yes. And I don't mean to not say them in my list I was just thinking of jobs.
Yeah.
But, oh my gosh, the victims, they live, we don't even understand. When we do our criminal justice charade of a trial and, the gavel, the victim doesn't even get to participate in this. That's why I believe in restorative justice, where you sit in a circle where the harm has been committed and you talk to the man or woman who injured you and you say, why did you do that? What happened? Why?
Right.
And then you make the request of, what can you do to repair this harm? What can you do? So it changes our whole universe, because suddenly you're involved. Suddenly you understand. He goes to prison, let's say, but you and him, you're connected. You already said you feel connected to him on some level. Yeah. But that connection shifts now suddenly, because you understand why he did this, or you get, you have a glimpse, and that mystery's gone. And then, maybe there's a friendship somehow. I mean, honestly, I don't say that glibly. There's a healing there, because you guys are already, I mean, if you believe in karma, this is karma in its, exact point. This is where karma meets. And the next life, you guys are going to be doing something again. There's another dance to be had. But imagine healing that in this lifetime.
Yeah, I love to think of it as, we're all these beings of light. And the brain, the body, the things that happen to us, the trauma that we carry. But when we can connect on that pure, heart to heart, light to light, soul to soul, however you envision it. And I certainly feel connected with him.
Yes.
On that light to light level, because I now get it. I now understand what he most likely had endured.
Yes, and in the same way, when a baby is born, there's a baby being that I know of being born today, the world changes, right? We may not know it, but subtly the world has shifted because we have a new soul in. Yeah. Same when someone dies, the world, it's just a slight shift, but someone has died and we know the vacuum is there. It's like breaking up with a boyfriend or something. there's just a vacuum in your life. And so when you found out that he died, there was a vacuum because you had that energy going towards him all your life on some level, right? There was some connection, some energetic connection. So I find your story really like deep, like these are the deep things we don't even talk about
Yes.
with a crime, with a person who commits a crime and a victim of a crime. So this is the magical part, I feel.
Yeah.
Well, there's the healing that's available. And, you're such a warrior, such a healing warrior. I can feel that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And well, wanting to know about trauma, that's evidence of a healing warrior, and we're all healing warriors once we know. I mean, when I read that book, The Body Keeps the Score,
Oh,
right? It was like bang, 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 bang. And it's like, hello, this is me. I'm not an insane lady. I am just traumatized. I can be magnificent.
yeah.
Which is how
I think that's one of my top. I talk about it when I give presentations, and it's one of my top books that I say was that life-altering aha moment of, well, one, oh my gosh, I am not broken forever. That I can do the healing work necessary to fix this.
I mean, what a gift he gave us. Thank you, Bessel. Thank you, Bessel
Right.
van der Kolk. No, but all the people working in this field, Donna Nakazawa and Gabor Mate and all, Bruce Perry, his book blew me away. It's just, the information is there and the healing possibilities are there. And I just want everyone to know what they are and to dive in. And because not all healing modalities are appropriate for any, it's like it's a potpourri and it's selective. You've really got to find out what works for you. It's not, it's not, okay, tap today and, meditate tomorrow. It's like, one of the guys, he keeps writing me, and I just wrote back to him. I was like, just meditate. And then he wrote back to me, he says, I can't even sit still for two seconds, but he just sent me another letter, and he says, I've been doing it 3 to 5 minutes. So,
That's good.
well, when you're in a prison and you're like this, he's been stabbed. He was stabbed. And so he was stabbed in prison. So how do you feel safe? How do you stop? How do you stop the mind?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's the thing. You just, even the person you live with, your cellie, like, who is he? Is he going to attack me? Most guys, they sleep with the light on and they keep an eye out. They keep an eye open. I mean, you never really get enough rest in prison. Right. And that's one of the mandates of restoring from trauma, of healing from trauma, is getting enough rest. Yeah. So we need to lower the prison population so everybody can have their own room, and then turn the lights off so they can get some good rest. That's my first thing I want to make sure we get done.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, truly. So what are you doing follow-up studies in seeing how long has this project been going on? And has it had enough longevity to see a serious impact?
Okay. So actually today, September 18th, is the first day I ever stepped foot in a prison, this 2 years ago. So today's my anniversary of when my life changed. Yeah. We started the pilot program, January 5th, 2019. And we made the film February 12th, 2020. So, like, we're like on a rocket ship right now. Yeah. In the 6 months since the film has gone, we've got over 100 volunteers, and we're creating circles. The idea, because we can't go into prison right now, we're doing circles in communities and for returning citizens so that they can start healing, because they, and doing programs for them And the biggest thing we're doing is hopefully with the governor's permission, we can make Delaware the first trauma-informed prison system in the United States. And I'm working with the parole officer and trauma therapist in Delaware. And see, Delaware has only 3,400 incarcerated men and women. That's one prison in California. Okay, so
Yeah.
It's still a mouthful, but we can chew this. We can get this. We can do this. And my vision, let's do this in 6 months, and then we just roll it out to the rest of the United States. So trauma-informed prisons means everyone in prison knows that the potential for triggers. You ask the question, what happened, instead of what's wrong with you. And you really do. You say, oh my God, this kid is he's whacked out. Because that's what you do when you're traumatized. You yell and you scream and you go out of your mind. You go out of your mind. The mind is not available. The brain is not available. So when that happens, instead of sending him to the SHU for 2 years or 3 years and truly damaging him, we calm him down. We put him in a cell by himself, probably but a cell, not the SHU, not solitary confinement. And we ask what's going on, like what happened. And then you find out his mother just died, or you find out, he hasn't eaten in 2 days, or whatever it is. There's a root cause for all of this behavior.
Yes.
We got to get to the root now.
Yeah. I mean, you see that a lot on, I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn in the mental health arena. And there's a lot of the memes and the quotes that are out there about when a child's behavior, it's not that they're a bad little kid. It's they're trying to say something, and it's along the same lines here. It's that almost in that child's mentality, because their brains never, with the trauma that they endured, never really learned to communicate those emotions and those feelings and how to process it.
Exactly. Honestly, in my class with the men, I felt like I was with a bunch of like 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's their emotionality, and that's their level of emotions. They're playful, they're joyful. We do some crazy exercises, like a thing called Crazy Eights, where they get to be goofy, or peel the banana. We did at camp, like camp songs, crazy camp songs. They never had that when they were children. They never went to camp. They barely went to a playground. So just even letting them play for a little bit, let's bring some joy. Because remember, what you do to other people, you do to yourself. So if you commit a crime, the person you've injured yourself. And that old saying, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. Well, guess what? It is. And it's no lie. And the trauma you inflict is the trauma you inflict in yourself. So this is a cycle. It's a cycle of abuse. And, we see it in our police departments. They're traumatized, and they're trigger happy because they're traumatized. And that's why I say no shame. No shame to anybody for being traumatized. But we need to get help, and we need to be aware what we're doing. And first responders, policemen, criminals, people committing crimes, traumatized. Okay, so let's get help, and let's stop the shenanigans, as I like to say. We can have a beautiful community and society that isn't on full alert all the time, and numbing and addicted. How many years did I have a glass of wine at 5:00? How many years? I've stopped. I'm not drinking. I'm still drinking coffee. I still got some, but
yeah, I got you.
But the wine is not required anymore, which is, and it is like, it's fine. It's fine. But there's something that I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel that exhaustion that I had worked already 13 hours. So I wanted to just, it was the only way I could stop myself from working. So, I'm going to stop at 5 today. Okay.
Yeah. Beautiful. So anything that we didn't tap upon yet that you would like to talk about?
Just that we're all magnificent, really, seriously. And that's every criminal and every, even, your neighbor that drives you crazy, and, the person that can't smile. That was a little baby once. That was a beautiful little baby once. And that's who we are. And when we find our innocence and welcome our innocence, that's what we can create. So,
yes, I love that. And that's my very first presentation that I ever gave. It was actually at the National Crime Victims' Rights Awareness Week, downtown Cincinnati. And standing in front of this group, the mayor was there and TV news crews. And one of the things I said was, we're both, James Mills and I were both born these innocent little creatures and these little babies. But somewhere along the way, he chose the road. And that's how I used to look at it. But now I think maybe chose the road isn't the right. I mean, yes, he made choices. However, I think he was directed down this road by trauma was what, at least I think, most likely happened.
Yes. It's the choice word is an interesting word. And that's the one I'm going to be challenging while I'm on this path, because he didn't see any other way. So it was more like he was funneled. He was funneled.
That's great. I love it. That's it. Yes. Yeah. That it was like, well, here's where you're going. Yeah.
Well, trauma funnels you down that path, because trauma doesn't, first off, Gabor Mate says, trauma creates separation. So it makes you think that you're not in this with anybody, that you're on your own, that you're by yourself. And which is a lie. If you really want to understand it, like when we really get connected and we know that we are in a global family, and there is support out there, but how do you find it? How do you find it? So, so when you feel like you're separate and you're alone, you don't know how to ask for help. And down the road you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And to play devil's advocate a little bit, but I'm going to come around back on it, is, I had a super high ACEs score and I was funneled down that trauma road as well. However, here's my however, I have a high resilience score because I had those caring adults in place, my grandma Kitty, my best friend's parents, so I had people that believed in me and loved me without hurting me and so forth. So that's
the difference.
Where that split happened.
That's where the funnel happens, right there. Yeah. It's that one person or that community that embraces you and says, wait a sec, this isn't okay. And that's what I'm here to say is, wait a second, this isn't okay. Let's change this.
Beautiful. Well, again, I find it all just incredibly beautiful and fascinating. And had we had this conversation 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been like this, because this was, I didn't understand the impact of trauma. I knew the impact of trauma on myself. It just never thought about what had happened to, this criminal, this incarcerated person who had at the time I thought destroyed my life. So.
Well, he had. I mean, we can say that for sure. And yet you found your resilience score helped you bounce back, and your great spirit and your big heart. So I'm so happy for you. Sorry about my dog.
Oh, that's okay. My dog's laying right here. She'll probably pop her head up like, hey, what's happening? Well, I just thank you for the work you're doing. I just think it's an incredibly beautiful gift to the world, really, to all of us, the people you're working with in the prison systems, but those of us, who are learning from it.
Thank you so much, Teri. I really appreciate this time and really getting to know your story, because that's really an important piece in this whole evolution of trauma-informed prisons, trauma-informed criminal justice system, and a trauma-informed society, which is really where we're headed. And thank you for being on the front lines with me. We're going to change this. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's what we're going to do.
How do people get a hold of you?
CompassionPrisonProject.org. And please take the ACE quiz. We have it there. So you can see our extended quiz, which has 10 more questions, including homelessness, foster care, other like annihilating factors of childhood.
Okay.
And, volunteer if you want, donate if that moves you, and just, trauma. Let's figure out how we're going to get through this together, because that's how we're going to do it.
Wonderful. That was my last question was, can people donate to help you continue the cause? So awesome.
Absolutely. We needed our crew. We're expanding like the wildfires in California.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're on fire over here. So
wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again for your work. And it was wonderful to meet you.
Same here, Teri. Thank you again. It's been great.
All right, everyone, thank you for tuning in to the Healing Place podcast. One little note that I just wanted to throw out is right before I came on to record this interview, I received an email from Amazon Music that the Healing Place podcast has now been added to Amazon Music, which is very exciting news. So downloaded in 73 countries, which I also recently found out. So yeah, it's exciting stuff. So there you go. All right. Well, everyone, until next time, remember, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening today to the Healing Place podcast with your host and trauma warrior, Teri Wellbrock. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about Teri, her mission, and the Hope for Healing journey, visit Teri's website at www.teriwellbrock.com. Thank you for liking, commenting, sharing, and offering your reviews on our YouTube channel, audio outlets, and Facebook page. And as Teri reminds us, until next time, remember, be gentle with yourself.